Okay, welcome back, everybody, to Two Men and the Cloud. Today, Bob Agno, Elliott Baretz have a guest. Our guest is Steve Fleischiger. And, Bob, I know today, Steve and I and you, we're all going to be bantering about FinOps, which is a very big overarching conversation, but one that I know is near and dear to your heart. And I thought maybe you could just sort of frame it for us a bit.
Sure. So I really believe, and this is my theory, that cloud management is really what we're going to see the next phase of IT. And being able to manage your assets in a multi-cloud or even in a single public cloud environment is going to be so key moving forward that understanding how to manage it, how to purchase it, how to deploy it is going to be the most important thing moving forward. I think we all understand moving the cloud is a great opportunity for many organizations. And like we've spoken about in past podcasts, is there's going to be hybrid environments, there's going to be 100% cloud environments, or somewhere in between. And to be able to manage that process from purchase to consumption to invoicing to everything is going to be so important for companies to understand moving forward. And it's a little bit of a green field right now. And something like FinOps, where it tries to put a process around it, is going to be really important. So I'm really excited about today's conversation because I think we're hopefully bring some insight into this kind of new theory of cloud management and FinOps as a whole. And to be honest with you, probably 8 weeks ago, I hadn't even heard of FinOps, and digging into it and seeing some of the different areas and the movement and the philosophy around it is pretty interesting. So I'm really actually looking forward to this conversation with Steve to talk more about it and get a little bit deeper into the subject.
And perfect segue. So, Steve, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah. So, I've mentioned we were talking a bit before we started to hit, I guess record, but one of the most fascinating parts of this whole podcast experience for me is hearing how somebody gets into their particular area of expertise. And I'm sure I just would love to hear where your background lies and how you're coming to the cloud conversation. And I guess in particular, the FinOps conversation, but just kind of take us back in the time machine. Tell us where you're coming from and all this.
Sure. So I came from more of a classical engineering background to begin with. I started off in aerospace. I worked for McNeil Schwindler briefly as an intern, and then I was on the space robotics program for about 3 years at McDonnell Douglas Space Systems Company, and I was R&D projects, and that's how I met my thesis advisor. And then I got my master's in control systems, automatic control systems and robotics at RPI. And then it was a couple of years in New York, and then I worked for Teradyne in Boston for a while, and I was primarily data there, looking at production data on operating floors. And I had a lot of good customers, Philips, IBM, what have you, AT&T. And then, so I worked for some great companies, and then I wound up going back to San Diego, and then I wound up getting into IT, like many other people I know, around the time of the last major recession in 1994, not the 2001, and actually, no, 2008. And so anyways, 12, 15 years in IT, and I was doing site reliability engineering, and naturally I tended to flow towards data. Anyways, so about 3 years ago, I joined PCM, and then we were acquired by Insight. And my primary focus for the last 2 years has been as an AWS Cloud Solutions Architect. And then again, I got my MBA like 2 companies ago because my company was an online university. And the things that we could do is they would pay for our tuition. And so I got my MBA while I was there. So it sort of naturally segued into cost optimization and financial operations and cloud.
Perfect. And I guess a couple thoughts there. So you just did it, but FinOps equals financial operations. And I guess there's a box here that I want to make sure we're drawing and hoping you can help with it. So when we talk about FinOps, is it all about cost optimization? Is that the box that we're talking about?
No, cost, I would say no, not entirely. Part of it is the ability to make decisions and quality of your processes. It's really a cultural, um, it's a cultural approach, where it needs to be integrated into your processes and your controls. And I think really it comes back down to management having confidence that they're getting good value from their investment in cloud, and that they're what they have in cloud is well built, accords with best practices, meets reasonable expectations. So it's not just cost, but cost definitely is tied to everything throughout that process, I think.
Okay, that makes sense. So how would you, I mean, if you had to, kind of, well, I'm asking you right now, how would you describe FinOps? I mean, what's the, high altitude description of what we're talking about?
I mean, so we look at it in three pieces. The maturity model, which is to inform the end users. That's things like understanding their cost, understanding metrics and benchmarks related to cost and performance. Then you look at once you have the data, and once you've got the you're looking at optimization of your spend within cloud, and then you're looking at operational processes. So it really is kind of a continuous snake eating its own tail type thing. And the other thing is, frequently we have conversations where people say, well, at the beginning when we acquire the onboard customer, we do this, and then the reality is that I've got customers that have 234 accounts. Some of them are less than a month old, and some of them that are 3 years old. And there's this ongoing continuous process within all of them of informing them as to where they are within their environment, and then optimizing that, and then continuing to provide them some feedback for operational excellence.
Makes sense. Yeah, go
Steve,
ahead.
Yeah, that brings me to a thought, because in traditional IT, where we think about a data center, right? Traditionally people would throw hardware at a problem and just let it run, right? Because you had sunk costs into that. Of course, you had data center costs that were variable, but pretty much predictable. So, is it really? Do we need a new way of thinking about this, since there's a lot of variable costs in what you were talking about now, and it's a big change for the way people think about
Yes.
IT, right, and spending.
Yeah, I mean, so I agree with absolutely what you're saying. I think when you're on-prem, you've already invested in your ESX hosts. You've already invested in your licensing. Your networking costs tend to be fairly fixed. You have a pretty good idea of what your costs are going to be within, the life cycle of your hardware. And then, you have a hardware refresh, and then you've got, license renewed. Cloud is a spend as you go model. So you're not paying for capacity that you're not using. You don't have to buy 300 terabytes worth of storage if you only need 150, because sometime in the next 5 years you're going to exhaust your capacity, and you can't do that in a prod environment. But on the other hand, what happens is I go into customer environments, and because it's software-defined data center, I'll have a customer that spins up 220 EBS volumes in the space of 2 days, or we'll go in there and they'll be provisioning IOPS drives, and suddenly their costs in an $8,000 account goes up $30,000. So, and it's also that your costs tend to be much more hidden in cloud. It requires a little bit more. Your cost for identifying what is actually driving your costs, your total cost for information, are higher in cloud. And so you need to have additional tools to be able to lower that cost of ownership, the TCO. So for example, I was just talking to some customers the other day. They had, I think it was 221 unused EBS volumes, amounting to about $4,200 a month worth of wasted spend.
Steve, I'll be I end up becoming like the nomenclature police.
I'm sorry.
When you say EBS.
Elastic block storage. So basically they spun up 221 disk drives in cloud. And then they maybe they were never attached to a resource or what have you, but bottom line is one of these, at the end of every month they're going to get charged for how much storage they've provisioned. And thank you, by the way. And so
no, I mean, honestly, it's become the theme with these discussions, because we are all so used to our own vernacular. I mean, my wife always makes fun of me because she hears me on the phone and I'll be throwing acronyms around all day, and it's like she says, it's like I'm listening to a foreign language, and I'm I get it. I appreciate that. So no, you're in.
So I feel your pain, but yeah. But no, I mean, so they spun up 221 drives, and they were wasting essentially $50,000 a year, $4,200 a month. But out of those 200 drives, half of them, or half of that cost, $2,000, was just 6 of those drives. So I mean, they had to go out and have a conversation with some subject matter expert or some business owner and say, hey, do we really need this? And for some of those drives, they would save 60 cents if they had that conversation. And for 6 of those 220 drives, they would save $2,000. One of them was $1,200. That thing had been on for 3 years, and they'd spent $43,000 on a drive that they never got any value on. So how do you get that information when your costs are spread over a dozen of accounts and regions and what have you? And part of that is what we try to bring to our customers, which is giving them access to their data and then putting a value on decisions that they may make or actions they may take, so that with limited resources, engineering resources, they can go out and they can keep that spend dialed in. And that's an ongoing and continuing process, like you were saying, Bob. It's not just, I mean, with cloud, it has to be a discipline, and that's why we meet with our customers on a monthly basis, and we give them some tools, and we're trying to teach them, processes that they can integrate into their business, and that's all the way down to giving line of business owners access to dashboards so they can check them every week to make sure that they're not spiraling out of control. It's meeting with the engineering managers to say, here we see these opportunities within your environment. It's meeting with developers to say, here if you replatform or refactor this application, here's what we think your cost savings could be. It's a whole series of things, all the way to CFOs and finance teams to do chargeback models, so that the accounting team can get everything in a bill that shows just PO numbers, and you can map that always all the way back and all the way forward to what services are being consumed in cloud, which can change dynamically. And in particular in large organizations, we have one customer that has 234 accounts. We were just talking to another customer and say, well, how do we compare to companies of similar size? And I said, well, when you're looking at hundreds of accounts, it's not really that you're looking at hundreds of accounts all at once. It typically is more that you've got line of business owners and they have maybe 5 accounts. One's QA, one's dev, one's production, one's staging. It's and each within those, there's patterns that we can observe and trends that we can help them to see. But ultimately, what we're doing is giving them access to their data and helping them to do their planning and their strategy. We're partnering with them. Sorry if I kind of went down a rabbit hole.
No, that's great.
That's good.
It's a good rabbit hole. I appreciate it. So, the other thing that I've kind of come to understand as it relates to this conversation is that there are absolutely different moments in time where you get brought into a FinOps conversation. And I know that there were the 3 phases that, I think are typically articulated when it comes to FinOps. But, like one case in point, I know, Bob, you and your team often get brought in when a company's thinking about moving from an on-premise environment into a cloud environment. And that's a catalyst,
right,
as it relates to, what are the right economics within the cloud, or what are my economics going to look like in an optimal state once I'm in the cloud? And I would imagine that falls in that beginning phase of FinOps.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
right?
Inform.
Doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay.
It does. Yep.
So I guess if we're going to talk through, maybe it makes sense to talk through each phase, as we look at each phase, what does that mean? And what is it that typically, what's the big impact in each of these areas? Is that a decent place to wrap our heads around?
I think it's a great idea.
Why don't I just talk a little bit about the high level phases, and then we'll let Steve bring his expertise to them, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. And the other thing I want to throw out there is that when we talk about these 3 phases too, it may help to sort of frame FinOps in the sense that I know that, you've done a great job in terms of helping educate me in terms of what is FinOps as an entity and how does that translate into our ecosystem and us and all that jazz.
Yeah. So really, FinOps is a philosophy, right? It's an organization that has put a foundation together that really is trying to handle cloud financial management in a full life cycle, right? So there's 3 stages, right? It has the inform stage, which is all about visibility and allocation. There's an operate, which talks about continuous improvement in operations. And there's the optimize phase, which is all about utilization. And, to what Steve was talking about, the snake eating his tail, it's a full circle type of scenario. And one of the things that's interesting to this is The cloud brings a lot of opportunity, but if you don't do it right, it brings a lot of risk. And that must keep CFOs up at night for large organizations with big spends, because the $42,000 example that was just talked about, if you look at a large organization, that could be in the millions if not done correctly. So really understanding these three phases and where things fit makes it really a decision matrix on moving to the cloud and really understanding the cost once you get there, because it is a new model. And for a lot of people in IT, it's a new process and a way of thinking. And you have to think about it a little bit outside of the box, which is kind of what this foundation is about and trying to understand. And to your point about Inform, what my team does is what we call cloud economics, and part of that is really helping clients to understand what they have on-prem and then what the cost would be running in the cloud. And what's interesting is a lot of people are very aware of what they have running, but they don't know how much compute power that they're using in the data center. And it's interesting, as we go through this, I found the most important thing that we do is size their workloads that are in the data center currently for the cloud. And many are surprised how little compute power that they're using in the data center currently. So that is an example of two opportunities. One, to move that workload to the cloud and see what your costs are in there. But also, if you're going to continue in a hybrid or a data center and a cloud environment, you're able to look at reducing your costs in your data center as well and doing some server consolidation. So that's another kind of benefit for our clients once they get more data, like Steve was talking about, that they can make better decisions not only in the cloud but also in their data center. So going through these phases is really interesting to me, because Inform is not only what we do, but it's also that financial stuff. So would love to hear, your high level, Steve, on what you think of these phases and some of the most important tasks in them.
Sure. I mean, so I agree with everything we were saying. That costs do keep the CEOs up. I think that one of the major things is, how should we use cloud? We get that question a lot from customers.
Right.
I used to work for a company that had to build out a DR site because I actually got hired because of the witch fires in San Diego, and they were approaching one of our data centers that had virtually all of our hardware in it. And the company decided they were going to build out a DR in Denver. And to do that, they had to rack, they had to stack, they had to buy licenses. At the end of the day, they had a full copy of prod with all the associated expense. In cloud, I had a customer that built out a performance load environment. Their cost went up from 4,000 to 40,000 one month, and it went back down to 4,000 because they shut it down after they were done using it. And so you can do things in cloud that you can't do on-prem, and things that are clearly required and important. But the problem then is you wind up spinning up resources in regions, and it becomes more difficult to track where you've spent money and where you haven't. So for example, I had one customer that was at the beginning of COVID wanting to shut down costs. And so one of the things that we do for them, or for our customers, give them this single pane of glass that tells them what's running and where it's running and what it's costing. And we give them access to that data in a way that is difficult to acquire with the native management console tools. And part of that is because one of the ways that you segregate cost in AWS is by breaking it out into separate accounts. The other is you use tagging. And that's important for chargeback models. It's important for line of business. Sometimes it's important because of data protection. But the flip side of that, sort of the other side of that, that knife, or the other edge, is that when these customers were going in and they were trying to reduce costs, and they were just looking at the management console, they were looking at Northern Virginia and they were looking at Oregon. They weren't looking, in this case, where they'd cut back salaries, they'd reduce salaries, they'd lay people off. And this one guy practically came to me in tears because they had left this one cluster of servers. It had been spun up for a perfectly legitimate reason, for sales, running for 6 months at 3 clusters, a 3-node cluster, $750 per cluster, $13,500, just running out in Singapore, or it was Tokyo, because that isn't where they were looking for costs. And they didn't realize it was in this one tiny little account where 85% of their costs were in these other accounts. And so part of what we're doing is giving them access to that fully loaded cost, giving them access to a single pane of glass, so they see where all their cost is across all of their environments, across all these different regions. And that is, reducing that total cost of ownership for cloud and making giving them better data on which to make decisions. The other thing is in that informed stage, giving them some benchmarks, giving them some type of metrics and alerts, and notifying them when things spin out of control, or when costs increase a certain amount. Also giving them feedback when they successfully are able to reduce their costs. And so we meet with them on a regular cadence to give them an idea of, okay, here's what your costs are. There's no unexpected spikes. There's no unusual trends or behavior, or if there is a change, to be able to explain that or dig into the data with them. And sometimes that's, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, like, I'm thinking when that regular cadence, that's an optimized thing. Is that fair? Would you?
It is. It's kind of,
okay.
It kind of bridges that gap between optimize and inform, because since we don't have administrative level access into our customer environments, we inform them. We give them an idea of what opportunities there are for optimization. We give them an idea of what the value is for any particular branch of those opportunities, so they can prioritize their limited resources, and then optimize. Frequently, that's us partnering with them to help them to make decisions, and then to give them feedback on those decisions. For example, if they move workloads from on-demand pricing to reserved instances, which is a way to make a commitment in AWS for long-term sprints, so you can reduce your costs for compute by, say, 40% on the compute component. We then go back a week later and we look to see whether or not the purchase that they made is actually being used. And we give them feedback. We tell them, 98% of the investment that you just made is actually getting the return that you want, and you've shifted these workloads, and here was your run rate, and here it is. I mean, and that constant flow of information back is that closed loop control that gives them the ability to predict costs and then hit their targets or course correct. Otherwise, it's that open loop control system, and you just hope you don't hit the mountain.
Yeah. So going back to the beginning, to inform, one of the things that I've learned along the way is that, it seems to me, anything that's in business or technology, it ultimately boils down to that formula of people, process, and tools, or technology. And when I think about that informed stage, clearly, having the right people, having the right processes, I think best practices there. But then tools, what got me thinking this is, you mentioned single pane of glass, right? It's what are the tools that you have seen that seem to just help getting our customers that kind of insight or information, or that the current status, the current state, maybe the ongoing state, the data that we keep talking about, for them to iterate against. What's your kind of 2 cents on that?
That's a really interesting question, because it's not just having the tools, like you said, it's the people and the processes. So for example, we've won clients who are using one of the tools that we bundle in with our service is a third-party cloud health management tool called Cloud Checker. And again, what it does is it aggregates the data from all of these different accounts. I mean, when I have a customer that has 234 accounts, it becomes impractical for them to manage that number of accounts. And the same applies to many customers that have, say, 5 accounts or 3, where you have multiple regions. It's something my professors in grad school called the tyranny of small numbers, which is 2 by 3 by 5 is 30, right? And so if I've got 234 accounts and I've got 26 regions and I've got 215 services, and the information on my environment is spread out across all of those different places, then it's not improbable that I will have an account where a developer is given access, and then right before Memorial Day weekend, they spin up our 4.8x large servers and they leave them running for 2 weeks. Or during the middle of a migration, we've got servers who suddenly are being given provisioned IAPs or what have you, or the servers get put out in a public subnet or whatever, having nobody reports on the fact that it's completely exposed and it's in any security group. So what we do is we give our customers access to that tool, and then we teach them, and we provide them video training on in their environment. We're available to answer questions they may have about hey, we've got a request from management. Is there a way we can respond to this question? Like how many users are in IAM groups, or are users actually using the workspaces that we're paying for on a monthly basis, or are there opportunities? What is our security and compliance standing? And trying to do.
No, go ahead. And I guess what I was framing also in my head is that it seems to me that there are different tools, like all within the inform stage.
Oh,
Like there are different tools for different functions as it relates to the FinOps story. So, I think Cloud Checker, and I think of that, maybe I'm wrong, right? But I think of it as a run rate tool, as opposed to maybe some of the tools that I think, Bob, you're using every day, which are, I don't know, I want to call them snapshot tools that help me take a snapshot of an ecosystem or an environment in a given moment in time, and then provide guidance in terms of next step outcomes. And I don't know if those two kind of tools overlap or not, but kind of maybe makes sense to talk through that a bit, to help people understand the different tools at different times.
Sure. And just also to emphasize what you were saying, I mean, some of the customer accounts that we've won, the customers had Cloud Checker. They had the same tool set that we're offering. The thing is that it's that yet another tool, or a YAT syndrome, that so many IT shops worry about, which is just giving them a tool isn't enough. It needs to be internalized. It needs to be part of their processes. The information needs to be readily available to them, and that's partly what we offer, is that we're helping them, where it makes sense to make best use of that information, and we're partnering with them, not just prescriptively telling them what to do. But yeah, I agree. I mean, so Cloud Checker, or the tools that we look at, have point-in-time reports. In fact, that's part of the function, is snapback function, where we look at, where they were 2 weeks ago, where they were 6 months ago. And sometimes that's extremely important. And the other thing is the ability to look at trending and look at reporting over time, and tell the customer, here's why your costs have grown, and here's the specific services and the specific accounts that they've grown in. I helped a customer see the other day that one of their accounts had just grown 80%, and it was now 10% of their total spend, and it wasn't one of their primary accounts. So again, they're very grateful for that, because you're giving them access to their information, and they were already looking at the tool, but just sometimes. I'm sorry, I'm definitely going down a rabbit hole here. Bob, did you want to try this?
No, I'm again.
No, I think
no rabbit hole is a bad rabbit hole.
That's right.
That's okay.
We should rename this podcast to Rabbit Hole, because I think it's really a good idea. No, I mean, you're spot on. I think it's just really important. There are a million tools out there. There literally are probably a million different tools out there, and you can pick many to do what fits your business or what you're looking for. There isn't a silver bullet that I've seen out there that does exactly what you want, because as you were talking about, Steve, some of the issues, right? You think about all those accounts, and then you think about all the invoices and all the bills and all the chargebacks and everything that has to happen. It really creates quite a long paper trail, to use an old term, to be able to manage these scenarios for customers. And it's getting quite cumbersome for large organizations and even small organizations that have many different accounts to manage all this process from start to finish. So, a process where people thought, I'm going to get all these efficiencies going to the cloud, and they may get that. It really comes with a lot of new business scenarios that they weren't expecting. And to be able to start really understanding these and, on what to expect, I think is really important for companies right now, because they can get lost in this scenario, and it can bring a lot of non-satisfaction with the cloud, because there's so many new processes and ideas and approaches that they weren't expecting. So it's just a very interesting time that we're in, obviously from COVID and everything, but the way that the cloud is exploding and people now are feeling like they have to move, it's getting to the point where they really need to understand what to expect. It's almost like we need to write one of those books, What to Expect When You're Expecting a Move to the Cloud. Right?
That is awesome. I love it. And that's the other thing I'm learning with these podcasts, is at least once a podcast, Bob comes up with some awesome, funny, hilarious little snippet. That's great. I love it. So just not to, kind of beat a dead horse on the tools thing, because I do think it's, I think it is one of those areas that could be quicksand for anybody stepping into this space if they don't, just the more they hear, the better off they are. Like, so for example, There's the tools that are the snapshot tools, and certainly Cloud Checker can act in that capacity. But I know, Bob, your group works with a tool called Movere, which is owned by Microsoft, and you've also used, BitTitan, no, not BitTitan, I'm sorry, Block 64, excuse
That's
me.
right. Yep.
And then, if, from an ongoing run rate perspective, I know that from a Microsoft angle, there's Azure Cost Manager, which is part of, that commitment to Microsoft within, modern Azure. And that, and then that just sort of distills into the flavors of, a single pane of glass, or not flavors, but the notion of a single pane of glass. So, for example, I know, Steve, I'm pretty certain, and you're much more the expert than I am on this, but Cloud Checker, I think, can be a single pane of glass, whereas I think Azure Cost Manager cannot. But then there are other third-party platforms out there that can. So, I mean, there's this sprawling thing that, everything's moving fast. There's a lot of money being put into the cloud because there's a lot of need for the cloud, but there's also a lot of waste, and these are the tools that people need to wrangle with. So just kind of, I had my own little rabbit hole moment there. Anything that you guys want to add on for that?
No, and I would say, we get asked this question of, do we do Azure, do we do GCP, do we do AWS? I mean, one of the things I like about our company is we try very hard to be sort of vendor neutral, solution agnostic. So in as much as I'm talking primarily about AWS, if a customer comes to me and says this workload makes more sense in Azure because of licensing or what have you, we're happy to support them in that. And then, frequently the issues they have with cloud have nothing to do with cloud as such. A Cisco ASAV, they need to build out a SQL AG, they need to know whether or not their Microsoft licenses apply to workspaces. So again, one of the things I like about the company is that we're kind of the tip of the spear for this large professional services organization where we have a lot of people with this sort of very deep and very wide knowledge. And so when we talk cost management, I see work being done on the Azure Cost Manager tool equally as good as some of the work that we do in the AWS practice, because again, it's not just the tool, it's the people that are actually looking at the data and who have the expertise to, the experience to say, these are the sort of things that we see across all of these different customers that we've been supporting for all of these years. And there's a lot of trends and a lot of experience you can pull from that. And so it's not just the tools, it's the people who are looking at it and the type of experience we have and the type of sort of intellectual property that we've developed over time, and the internal people and processes, as you said, not just tools.
Yeah, I like that. Because it's fair. I mean, I know that I personally fall into that trap where I think single pane of glass and I go straight to technology, but I think you're right. I think it's way beyond the technology. It's the expertise and the experience.
But
and
to be fair to what you were saying though, I mean, customers definitely want a single pane of glass. We're having more and more customers who are in Azure who are also in AWS or vice versa, right? And they want to be able to, in fact, I just got a request the other day, can you please give this person access to our Azure cost data inside Cloud Checker, which is sort of the exception here. But I mean, our customers want to go there, but I don't know that any of the tools are there yet. I mean, I think we're still a year or two or so for the major cloud providers to, any one tool, whether that's Cloudability or Cloud Health or Cloud Checker, or any of them. I don't think any of them, because their level of experience in one or the other cloud varies.
It's where they grew up. Yeah, whatever direction
exactly.
they grew up from. But then to your point, eventually there will be a platform that's a true technical, but that's limited in value if you don't have the people and the experience to, establish the best practices. And it's not just about the technology, which I think is very fair and good. I'm glad we're talking like that. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. So beyond that first stage, right? We get in from, so I guess it's inform, and then is it optimize? That's not, no. Wait, what's second?
I think you could do either optimize or operate.
Okay, optimize. Okay. Well, gosh, Bob, what of the three, what's after inform?
Yeah, definitely operate, right?
Okay.
I think that, because if you want to think about the way I think about it, right, is inform, you're really trying to make a decision on moving to the cloud. Once you've made that decision in the cloud, how do you operate those workloads to make sure they're functioning the right way in the cloud? And then after time, right, you're just getting used to it. You then want to optimize those, because everything changes, right? everything changes in your business, everything changes in sales, and even price and different models change all the time in the cloud. So you want to make sure you're optimizing those workloads, not only from a functionality standpoint, but from a cost standpoint as well. So you're getting your best bang for your buck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's classic in the on-prem environments where you've paid for your ESXs, you paid for your licenses. You've got sort of your standard template for servers that you spin up, or a 2 CPU, 8 gig, or what have you. And when the people move to cloud and they do that initial lift and shift, they tend to carry all those patterns with them. And one of the nice things about cloud is that you can easily upgrade hardware. You can easily move from an older instance type to a newer instance type. And that kind of flexibility is very helpful. But it also gives you this enormous opportunity once you've been in cloud for a month or two and you see the pattern of use and you see utilization. Maybe you can save some money there. And there's all sorts of decisions like that. Can we re-platform this? Can we refactor this? And we've got a really good team that we work with that can help with that type of thing.
And optimize. Yeah, just to jump in there, right? Optimize has become really important with COVID. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is a lot of people saw their sales revenue just shut off. Yeah. And obviously their cloud charges did not and continued, right? Yeah. So being able to look at that and optimize that became such a priority for many different companies during COVID, because it forced them to now take a look at, oh my goodness, we obviously want to keep people on staff. We want that to be the last scenario. So let's start looking at where we can save money. And a lot of times they looked to the cloud and started to do optimization. And I know we were doing a lot of that out of my team. And Steve, I'm sure you saw a lot of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and one of the nice things is we've been helpful and we've been successful in helping our customers do exactly that. But also, I mean, just along the same lines, not just in helping a customer go from 60 to 30 or save a few $100,000 on RIs or helping to eliminate waste. We had a customer who came to us who wanted, COVID, they shifted their business model from in-store delivery to online delivery. And so they started making significantly more use of an AWS service called Connect. And they came to us and they said, can you give us an idea of how many direct dial numbers or toll-free numbers or what we've used in the last 3 months? We were able to give them data for 12 months that showed, so they could make business decisions, so they could do strategic planning. So part of what we're doing is, it goes even back, an optimization and a form that kind of blur together, right? And in having that data that you set up in that first stage, now you can use it in that third stage, that sort of DIKW or data intelligence, knowledge, wisdom, cycle that you get. And so part of what we do is help them get access to their data so they can make decisions, whether that's minimizing their footprint in cloud or deciding to refactor an application, or even just where are we spending our money, or how could we be more efficient, or what is our business, how is that operating? Yeah.
So when I think about and I think I know the answer to this, but when I think about IaaS and SaaS and PaaS, and I don't know if SaaS really applies to this, but if I think of IaaS and PaaS as it relates to FinOps, I naturally understand the IaaS implications. Mm-hmm. Are there FinOps implications to PaaS? Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm assuming, yeah, right? But I mean, how would you articulate that? What does that scenario kind of look like?
So, I mean, when customers are making decisions on renewal, or when they're making decisions on where to invest engineering resources, you look at what does it cost me to operate this application in cloud, and is there an alternative? And if you can go in there and you can say, by using serverless technologies, by using Lambda functions, or even just moving to SaaS, do we want to do this? For example, we had a customer who wanted to know whether or not to continue to do a log aggregation data collection service in cloud on instances, or whether it made more sense for them to go to the SaaS offering by that same provider. And we gave them exactly what their costs were for storage, what their costs were for compute, what the cost would be if they rebuilt their environment and they used modern instances like M6Gs or Graviton processors instead of the old M4s. We gave them, basically helped them to have meetings internally about which direction they wanted to invest resources so that they could optimize their performance and optimize their costs. So yeah, definitely they all play together. And I think depending on where you are in that process.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does. And So let me ask this. So in terms of, I'm thinking through one of the points I want to make about FinOps is that it's the kind of thing that, if done right, pays for itself. In the sense that, I know with our experience that there's a certain level of FinOps value that we provide just as part of helping our customers acquire Azure. That there's a value that we bring into that sequence, so that as our customers acquire Azure, they get access to some of the technology and some of the people to help them optimize their spend. And I call that a FinOps type motion. It's part of the acquisition. It's a value we provide. But I think separate from that, there are much more comprehensive engagement structures, much more value-added orientation that we provide on an engagement model, but in either case, if you think about the amount of waste out there, the number is something like $35 billion in wasted cloud spend every year. This should, no matter what, pay for itself. Fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is just saying what you were saying. Sometimes, like, we had a customer the other day that was spending twice what they expected on storage, and the reason was because they'd factor S3 target for a Veeam backup, incorrectly, and they were paying huge amounts of egress fees. Once that got nailed down, their company now had confidence that they were getting value, which classically is defined as cost over benefits, right, or benefits over cost. I don't remember which off the top of my head. But I think it's cost over benefits. Anyways, so I have to look it up now. but no, I mean, the companies want to know that they are getting good value for their investment in cloud, whether that is a decision to now that we've got our storage and our collaboration, it's that roadmap that we talk about for FinOps. We have engagements at different points depending on where you are in your roadmap to help you drive value. Whether that's migration, because we had one customer we worked with, they had a fraction of their current spend in cloud, because once we'd gotten these processes in place and we'd helped them to build out this discipline and supported them, they felt confident in moving 3 data centers to cloud, knowing that as they move these things to cloud, there's that initial optimization effort that Bob was talking about, which is that snapshot in time, whether that's Movir or SnapStart or what have you, to give them an idea of what their targets should be and what their costs are, so they can do planning, and so they can also optimize in that initial phase. And then there's the ongoing optimization, and then potentially later on down that migration, replatforming, refactoring, what have you. The ability for us to help them do that gives them confidence to do more of it and to see where they can get value, whether that's moving workloads to cloud or moving cloud workloads back on-prem to a hybrid data center. Just whatever works best for them, and be giving them the information that they need to make those decisions is a lot of what we do. And again, because we're not just trying to sell cloud, we're trying to help them, build out a solution that helps them do their business well. I mean, it helps them see value for their investment.
That's return on cloud investment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
what it's all about. Yep.
The new acronym, return on cloud. That's a Rocky. Return on cloud investment.
There you go. Nice.
Awesome. So perfect conversation. I really appreciate it, Stephen, you joining us today and talking to us about FinOps. I mean, any last parting words in terms of, kind of maybe where you see this thing going, or just anything that you want to add as a final note?
Just that, again, talking about that single pane of glass and these practices coming together, I think a lot of what we do in the different clouds, a lot of what we do in the on-prem data center, a lot of this is translating to our work in cloud. And so it's, I think it's an extremely exciting space, really rewarding, because we're helping our customers, achieve value in cloud. We're helping people, run their businesses or to see value, keep people employed. I mean, there's just genuinely, it's been a very rewarding place to work in, and we've got some great people here who are helping our customers. So again,
awesome. Thank
you for inviting me.
Of course. Bob, any final parting notes?
Yeah, no, it was a great conversation today, and my piece of advice is you have to plan, right? You just can't lift and shift into the cloud and think you're gonna save a bunch of money, right? There's a lot of planning that has to be done, whether it's on the front end before you move, And then once you get there, there's a lot of optimization that needs to be done and management that it needs to be done. So, right, you got to really plan this move and plan the work. And then you will start seeing that value and those cost benefits Steve was talking about. But if you don't do that and make a mistake a lot of folks have done, you will waste money, and then your CFO won't be sleeping at night, and that's going to be a problem. So, there's a lot of great best practices and lessons to be learned here, and just kind of follow the path, and it will lead you the right way.
Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. So thank you, everybody, for joining us again today here on Two Guys in the Cloud, and we look forward to all of our many, many future discussions and hope everybody has a great one. Thank you.
We'll see you next time.